So I wanted to talk about something a little different today. They say you should write about what you know. God, what does that say about me? Anyway, my topic today is about how to make mistakes and, more importantly, how to recover from them, or just kind of smooth them out, specifically in a live loop context. And this is something I could say I've had a lot of experience with. I think anyone who's in a live performance environment has run into at some point. And specifically, I'm gonna be focusing this video on the strategies that I use to kind of make those performance mistakes really smooth out or really create opportunities for delighting moments in your performances. This is a little bit like when you're going into an airplane or in a theater, you want to have an idea where the exits are. So we're going to be talking about kind of some of the things I have in the back of my mind so that when I'm in the moment, I know where to go next. And I want to talk about how I use those strategies. We're going to start with things more general and kind of more preparation-based, kind of before you get in front of an audience, to some of the more on-the-fly, in-the-moment, more chaotic elements of a live performance. And as a result, the tips will start out very specific and actionable and get a little bit more suggestive and improvisational as we go. That's by intention. Now, more than any video I've made to date, I think this is a topic that, first of all, I'm learning all the time. Like every day, every performance, I feel like I learn a little something about this topic. And I would love for people who are more experienced or just have different experiences to weigh in as well. So please, I hope you like the video. I hope you, I would love for you to subscribe, but really comments are really helpful. I hope the community who's been so kind to me can kind of help each other out as we navigate one of the trickier, stickier parts of performing. So with that, let's get into it. Okay, so I'm going to start down here at the looper now for this first tip, which is to know your tools. Now, whether your looper has 1 or 6 or any number in between tracks, you're going to be able to count on having access to certain functions and features. Every loop station has a play, a stop, and a record. And I assume all, if not the vast majority, have an overdub option as well. Those are what make a loop station a loop station. However, all of them also have an erase option of some kind. And I think most, if not all, have an undo/redo feature of some kind so that you can roll back mistakes. It's also a way to get a sneaky extra loop in there if you work into your arrangements. I use that a couple times myself. But you want to check to see where specifically your erase, your undo, and your redo are. In addition to knowing what features you have at your disposal, you also need to know how to access them and what limitations they may have. So for instance, what I think is called peeling on the Shanhun looper, which is a good name for it actually. Peeling away a layer, if you think of every track as like a stack of recordings, is in essence, most undo, redo basic functions will let you peel away one layer for sure. On the RC600, apparently, I discovered as I was building the script for this video, actually if you try to undo a one stack track, it will actually erase it, which is cute. But generally speaking, you're using it because you've added something to a loop that you don't want on top of an existing loop. So you, in the specific case of the RC600 with basic features, which I'll go through in a second, I have the ability to undo one layer. And when I use the undo action again, in my case holding a button, it will actually act as a redo, which will put it back. This has the effect that if you have at least 3 layers on your looper before you access undo or redo, you've no way of getting rid of the second, and kind of below layers of that loop. There's no way to get rid of them apart from erasing them. So you want to know what your looper's limitations are. Now, I'm going to move to actually putting the looper on camera to kind of show you how that works for the RC600 in this case. So I'm going to demonstrate this one at this point. And as a reminder, if you're new to the channel or you haven't seen it before, I have a guide on my channel with a full, basically how I set my looper up with a spreadsheet that has a full outline of all of the presets that I'm using. Still accurate to date, though I'm probably going to be changing things soon. But importantly for this video, I want to talk about which functions I have access to for specifically erase, undo, and redo. So for the purpose of this demo, I have 7 buttons mapped to some form of undo or redo. They're different than what's printed on this. But specifically for undos, at a track level, I have one for track 1 that you can see, one for track 1, track 2, and track 3. So track 1, this is set to the control function play record 2. which notably when I hold it down, will do an undo and then a redo option for that track only. This is the track 2 version of that. This is the track 3 version of that. I also have an erase because I'm using track stop 4, the control function for that here, which when I hold that button down, it will erase that track. So this is track 1 stop 4, track 2 stop 4, and track 3 stop 4. I also have an all start stop, which is currently button 7. It's the white one right here. This is set to, I think, all start stop 5, which when you hold that button down will erase all. I haven't been bitten by it yet. It might be dangerous to have it there, but that's there as well if I want to erase everything. And note button 8 over here, the undo redo. This is actually a distortion sound. It's a lie. I've changed what it does. It's not what it's written on the tin, as it were. So I'm going to demonstrate the limitations of this using the RC600 so I know what my own limits are. So first we're going to create a basic drum groove on track 1. So I'm going to put something on track 1 and we're going to kind of build from there. So I have now something playing on track 1. Now if I were to try to use track 1 undo by holding this button, it would erase my loop. It's kind of a quirk of the way the play record functions. It will act as an erase if there's only one layer. But let's add something on top of that. I'm going to add this little clap here from my sample pad player as an easily hearable difference in the loop. So let's add that as an overdub. So now I've got basic drums, and the second layer on that stack is my clap. So if I hold this button down, see it goes yellow for a second, it will peel away that clap. So now I don't have a clap anymore. If I do it again though, it's not going to peel away the bottom layer, it's actually going to re-add that clap. Same thing. Okay. So that's good to know that, okay, I've got one layer, if you will, one layer of that stack that I can remove or put back. Now I want to talk about this idea of the loops being become kind of permanent when you add layers above them. So right now, if I hit play, I've got drums and the clap. So what I'm going to do now is add a third layer. I'm just going to add just a little hi-hat kind of sound on top of that, and you'll see something interesting happens with the clap. Kind of. Here we go. Amusingly, that's a layer I would want to strip away because I screwed up the timing on that, but it'll do for the demonstration. So I've got that playing, right? Badly. And if I want to, I can undo that. And now it's just that clap. Now if I want to bring it, if I want to do it again, I can't get rid of the clap because when I hold this again, it's going to add the hi-hat. So I have that hi-hat now. And in fact, I am going to start this, undo that, and I'm going to do the hi-hat again. It's a little better. So that's how I would actually practically use undo and redo in that case. I didn't like how that sounded. I was able to get rid of it and add it again. Now, it's also interesting to note that that whole stack, that was all on track 1. If I want to add, say I want to add some chords here. I'm going to add some chords to track 2 just to kind of get a little bit of variation here. It's not going to disrupt my undo redo stack on track 1 at all. In fact, it's going to create a second stack that has just what track 2 is doing on it. So let's try that. We're going to add some chords here. I'm going to add some bass to that too. So I'm building onto the second stack. Okay, so now I've got, in my key, I've got the chords behind the song Dreams. Now, just to illustrate that the track 1's undo redo is unchanged, I'm going to still be able to remove that hi-hat on track 1. Watch. I can also remove the bass on track 2. And I can put them back the same way. So that's how that works. So in general, I need to remember that I have per track the ability to, for instance, if I have something I want to undo on track 3, and there are reasons to do this, maybe I want to add a section and remove it for dynamic reasons, I'm free to do things to other tracks, but I can't add something to the track that I want to undo later, because that will basically bury that layer in a way that it can't be accessed by the undo anymore. So that's basically what I mean about knowing the limitations of your looper there. So knowing what options you have is certainly part of the puzzle, but you also need to know in a given moment in the song which option is the correct one to kind of undo or fix a mistake in the moment. For instance, typically, as I said, when you use the undo feature, it will actually delete the only loop on the track, but I typically use the stop button because I like to always have the same muscle memory for erase and the same muscle memory for undo redo. So for instance, if I'm building my first loop, I'm going to hit stop, which will have the benefit of stopping the track, and then hold it to erase the track. That's my undo option. But as you saw with that hi-hat example, if I have something I don't like how it sounds, that option to go back changes from erase to undo. So that's just something you want to kind of keep in mind, so that when you're in a given moment in the song, you always kind of have a sense for which direction you want to kind of zig to get yourself back on track if something goes wrong. So that's it for that tip. Let's get to the next one. So this second tip is about what you do to prepare your arrangements so that they are less apt to kind of fall apart when you do run into an issue in a live environment. Specifically, I'm talking about building in a buffer when arranging. Now, this might be specific to the way I do my arrangements. In particular, one of the things that I like to do is I build a lot of my loops while I'm singing. I actually learned from YouTuber David Shanhun some of this stuff, but I like to take kind of copy-paste, if you will, parts of the song to use them elsewhere. And I like to build a buffer in when I do that. And specifically, I'm going to build my arrangements with this sort of redundancy in mind. Now, what do I mean by redundancy? So pretty typically, I'll be playing a song, and a lot of songs are constructed such that the solo section or instrumental break or what have you is going to be something that is a copy of, the chords are similar to or exactly the same as some other part of the song. Like it's a solo played over the verse, played over the chorus, maybe a pre-chorus, what have you. And what I like to do is, if I'm doing an arrangement, my favorite arrangements are ones where I'm playing the song, I build tiny drum groove, and I'm off and running. And I'm playing the song, singing it in real time, and I, in essence, record as I get to that section so that I can use it later. But importantly, when I'm doing that, if I make a mistake, if I miss a button, if I make a mistake on a chord that I really don't want to repeat in a solo section later, well, then I might need to kind of figure out a way out of that situation, because I can't stop. I'm not like just recording the loop. I'm actually performing the song, and the song is going from beginning to end. So how do I approach that? And it's this idea of redundancy. So for instance, recently I was coming up with an arrangement of the song Don't Look Back in Anger, which if you want to hear that version, just let me know. I'll do a video of that. And notably in that song, the pre-chorus is the same chord series as is used in the solo section. So my goal with that song is to perform, get to the pre-chorus section, record it, and then use it later. However, if I make a mistake, any number of mistakes while recording that section, then I'm kind of left in a situation, now what? And so in this specific case, and in many of the arrangements I do, I actually have picked a section that happens multiple times before I need it. And that lets me, for instance, quietly erase the section that I'm doing and then re-record it later. So this is just something that, for instance, as we go through the song, and I'll use a diagram here showing you the structure of the song in very, very high level terms. It's probably monstrous to take a piece of art and turn it into this big building blocks, but it's the way we think about songs, the way we think about sections, is as I'm going through the song, I'm doing a verse, and then I do a pre-chorus, and my goal, or my plan around an arrangement, is to use that first pre-chorus to record those chords. And what happens is, if I make a mistake on that, I can quietly press and hold the stop button on that track. And then, as the song progresses, if I failed to get the pre-chorus clean on that first try, I have a second attempt before the solo section. So the idea there is that, okay, well, if I mess up the first one, I have a second go at it. If I mess it up again, we're going to get to that in a later tip. But it does give me a bit of redundancy in my arrangement. So I have kind of two versions, two paths to success, if you will. One is not making the mistake, but two is if I make the mistake, I've already planned for and created a second opportunity. And the last thing I'll say about that is if a song does not lend itself to the strategy, and it may not for various reasons, that might be a song where I try to put the loop build at the beginning of the song. And usually in those cases, I'll try to kind of turn it into an intro and make it kind of sound interesting on its own right. But that's kind of what I'm thinking about when I'm doing arrangements for me, which is not just what happens if it goes right, but what happens if it goes wrong. So it kind of starts with the arrangement for me. Now, I can probably come up with demos of this in a lot of my arrangements. I can kind of point to this, and it's really more about the structure of the song rather than the performance of the song. But for an example of what not to do, I'm actually going to reference a video I did recently that I'm actually quite proud of. My friend Dan Arwady has a song, The Long Way Around, which I recorded. I wanted to do like a loving recreation using a loop station. And in that particular case, what I ended up doing was I did not build the loop this way at all. I actually have, if you look closely at that video, I record the verse in a very specific, very strange kind of way where it's the verse chords twice and then a little bit of passing chord and then in. And I'm recording like 9 measures, just like a weird number. And the reason I use that number is because it lets me reuse that verse as the second verse while I'm doing other things with the looper. Now, this is the first verse. There's one chance at the first verse I really don't get a redo at this. But in the case of an arrangement like that, where I'm doing a YouTube video, I can just re-record the whole thing. So I don't need to because I'm not performing it live. So this is a thing where if I was doing that same song in a live environment, I would probably arrange it differently. It wouldn't sound quite as precise. It wouldn't be quite as lovingly a copy of the original, but it would be something where if I'm performing live and I screw something up in recording those verse chords, then I'm able to make it happen. For instance, I might just record the repeating 4 chords in the verse, play that passing chord as it comes up, and I'm able to kind of improvise as I need to in case a mistake happens. So that's an example, kind of by counterexample, if you will, of what not to do, but the idea is really around, in my case in particular, if I'm arranging to record everything as I go, I want to make sure that that recording has multiple points of entry to the sections that I need. Let's get to the next tip. So that's enough for the kind of preparedness phase of this lesson, or these tips, if you will. The rest of these are going to be about what to do in the moment. And the first and most common mistake you're going to make, at least if you're me, is that first loop. And in most cases, and especially in the way my looper is set up, that first loop is super important. You want to get it accurate because if you don't have a preset tempo or an existing backing track or drum kind of rhythm set up, then that's what's going to set your tempo, and that's what's going to basically build a building block for everything that follows. So if it's kind of arrhythmic, then you really do, it's usually worth it in my experience to then prioritize fixing it, make it sound good, make it solid, and build on a good base. So I always prioritize redoing it even if I get it wrong. Of note, it's also the hardest in terms of execution probably in the whole song, because when I have other loops going, my looper will be able to quantize my recording and my playback, so it's going to get everything in line. But when it starts from a blank slate and I'm setting that tempo, that's when things can go really wrong, and it's just going to give you exactly what you put in. It's your messy human rhythm is going to be what is the basis for the looper. So I go into track 1, or the first track I record, with a healthy sense of this is the first one, that this one might need to be redone. And also on the positive side, it's the simplest one to clean. It's always an erase. So if I'm building, say, a drum groove and I get like my timing wrong, like I'm gonna just do a bad drum groove so you see what I'm talking about, right? Because you need to, if you do a lot of looping, you need to make sure that you get, if you're building a loop like this, that you are kind of on the one, and that you're synchronized if you're doing drums or a rhythm guitar, so that you're not starting in the middle of a measure or too early or something like that. So I'm gonna try to do this wrong on purpose, which I'm sure is gonna be tricky, but you'll kind of see what happens if I get it wrong. right? I like stumbled a little bit as I went for the button. Actually happened more naturally than I thought when I tried to figure out how do I make a mistake. Well, think about making a mistake. That's how you make a mistake, apparently. But, you know, I wouldn't want to build a song with that as the foundation. So what I do is I try to make sure that I'm ready to undo, and I kind of almost have to be convinced that I'm ready to progress in the song. So you may note that I change my posture when I'm playing my drum parts because I'm using my guitar as a drum. So I put my pick down, my mouth, whatever, and I'm doing this. So what I do is I make sure that I get that first loop right, and if it's not right, then I quietly and immediately erase it and then re-record it. And once I may like pause on that just to make sure that it sounds right. Then I pick up the pick, I change the guitar posture, and I get ready to play guitar or whatever the next part of this loop is. But that lets me do two things. One, I'm just that much faster in fixing the error. And it also means that from the audience's perspective, I was banging my guitar like a drum. Okay, I'm still banging my guitar like a drum. They don't know why. They don't know that it didn't record correctly necessarily. So I'm going to show you how I might like try to fix that. I'm going to erase this one, do one that's a little more subtle. And I'm just going to, whether it's good or not, I'm going to say I don't like it just for the purposes of this demo. Now, I did a lot of things at once right there. But basically what's happening is I'm recording a loop, I'm deciding in the moment, it's not going to be good enough, I need to do better. Rather than hitting, well, either in some cases, and I'll show you an example of this in a moment, I'm able to hit stop instead of hitting play to start the loop playing. I'll hit stop instead, which will both stop the loop, and I'm holding it down so I can erase it. But in this case, what I did is I played it back. I'm like, nope, that's not it. And I waited for the beat to be the right time. I hit and hold stop there as I'm playing the part on the guitar. So there's a couple wonky beats that I'm sure the audience will probably pick up, and they're going to be very grateful to you for not doing that the whole song. And what you want to do is just immediately erase it and immediately just get yourself back in the groove, stay grooving, get there, and then once you've got it right, that's when you progress to the rest of this. So that's my strategy around that first loop, whether it's rhythm guitar, whether it's using the sample pad player as a drum kit, my drums, my hand percussion, what have you. I want to make sure I get that right. Now, for there's another kind of like cleaner version of this even, which is if you just know, and especially if you mistime the initial click, because you won't really know that you're mistiming the second click until you've done it, right? But the first click has happened. It's in the past, inside of a second or whatever. So sometimes you know, oh, whoops, that first click was wrong. Like I knew it when I was trying to make a mistake a moment ago. And when you do that, what you want to do is, what you can do rather is you can just immediately, instead of hitting play, hit stop. Now, this I thought I captured really well in a recent cover video I put on the channel. So I'm going to actually pass to that. And the reason I'm going to use this video and I like it so much is, your audience has no idea what you're doing. And even when I did a pretty noticeable mistake there, it kind of smoothed out very quickly. But in this specific instance, the mistake I made was around clicking the button at the wrong time in this video I'm going to show you. The guitar playing or the beats, the drums, if you will, were on time. They were just out of time with the looping stuff. So I immediately destroyed the loop and recorded it again and just kind of went right into it. So there's no audible cue that I made the mistake in this case. So I'm going to play that for you real quick. You catch that? Okay, so I'm going to add some annotations and play it again. So hopefully you can always slow it down and watch that back. If you do this cleanly enough, people will not know that you made a mistake. And that's the cool thing about this particular thing. This is why I prepare for and actually even practice making this kind of mistake. Because it's going to happen, and if you're ready for it, you can make it something that people won't even notice. This one's a freebie for the just hide it under the rug version. So with that, let's go to the next tip. So recording your loops is part of it. But the other part of performing as a loop artist is, of course, playing them back and basically DJing your loops, turning them on and off when you want to. So I want to talk a little bit about what happens when that kind of dance that you do when you're turning tracks on and off goes wrong. In my setup, which I detailed in my last kind of major video on this channel, I talked about how when I hit play on most of my tracks, that playing happens a whole measure later. Importantly, that means that if I make a mistake, that mistake is going to probably be at least one measure long. There are ways to kind of spaz out and get at the play in less time than that, but I've typically found it's better not to. So there's multiple permutations of getting the wrong things playing at the wrong time. I'm just going to kind of outline 3 kind of high-level ones and imagine infinite variations on this theme. But these are all things that I've kind of cultivated strategies for getting back on track for. So first, a general tip. Whatever happens, try not to panic. Whatever you do, it's usually better to err on the side of just playing acoustically and figuring out when to come back in with your band, as it were, rather than just freaking out and hitting something wrong. You can't be perfect, but you should try to be musical. So a super easy example of this is, say, for whatever reason, I'm supposed to bring in the drums and I failed to. Now, on these next couple examples, I actually have some pre-recorded parts, so you can kind of see how this kind of feels. I'm saving some time on this one because this video is probably going to be pretty long. But for instance, I'm going to use the song All For You by Sister Hazel, which is a fun song I do. That one, I'm going to just have the chorus part right there. And you're going to see what I'm going to do is drop out the guitar and drop out the loop rather for dynamic purposes. And I'm going to fail, I'm recording the fail, hopefully fail, to hit the button to play on time. And rather than tell you what I'm going to do next, I'm going to kind of see what the music tells me to do next. So we're going to go from the chorus into the bridge section on that, and you're going to see how that all feels. It's hard to say what it is I see in you. Wonder if I always be with you. Words can't say, and I can't do enough to prove it's all for you. Rain comes pouring down, falling from blue skies. So that's an example where I decided to just let the chord progression on the bridge come up and just do one back and forth and then bring it in there. I could also have brought it in after one measure if I wanted to. Here's another alternative. Maybe I'm feeling a little more like intimate with my audience and I wanted the same thing but differently. Say what it is I see in you. Wonder if I'll always be with you. Words can't say, I can't do enough to prove it's all for you. Falling from blue skies, words without a sound, falling from your eyes. Sometimes when you try to make a mistake, you make an unforced mistake as a bonus. So yeah, you're welcome for that. But basically, there's another alternative, which is like, okay, this section doesn't have drums now. Cool. Now, you, as the person arranging and performing, know this was not your intent. Your audience may not. Maybe they noticed you tapped on something. I tried to do this without hitting the button. Without hitting the button. And, okay, that's interesting. You know, this is where having a good poker face can help, or, you know, kind of make a little whoops, save me kind of face and ride it and have fun with it. But this is about making it musical and being in the moment and just, hey, it's not the worst thing that happened. In both of those cases, the song went forward. One of those cases more strongly than the other. That was an actual authentic mistake in the moment. But that's something that you can kind of lean into. Now, as a variation on this idea, let's do this idea in reverse. So my arrangement of Dreams, which I also have pre-recorded for saving time, is I try to go from the solo directly into the verse. So just to kind of show you what that's supposed to sound like, I'm going to just play the solo here just so you can kind of hear it. Here I go again, I see the crystal vision. So that's a couple guitar mistakes there. It's hard to do these mistakes on on demand and not have them bleed in. Anyway, that's the way it's intended to go. I'm trying to use the spacing that I get with my loop settings to effectively, smoothly transition from one section to the other without any kind of gaps in the middle. However, for various reasons, I mechanically miss that click on play to start, or someone gives you a tip and you say thank you while you're playing the solo, and you're like, oh shoot, I was supposed to hit that button a second ago, and there's no sound playing. This is almost super common, but it's certainly common enough. And so what I like to do there is like, okay, well, here I am, and there's no guitar playing. So let's hear like a variation on that idea.
Here I go again, I see the crystal vision.
Right? So all I did there was just let the drums play for a couple beats. Give the song a space. And when you do that kind of thing, you may actually find you kind of like playing it that way better sometimes, or it's fun to have that variation. But that's another example of a way to kind of let the song breathe. Again, these examples just kind of scratch the surface, and the examples and strategies you'll want to employ will vary wildly and will depend on your arrangements, your skills, and everything else. So, find a system that works for you, but it's worth spending the time to figure out how you want to recover from these kinds of things, because they will happen. So I've already talked about the ways in which you want to try to recover from, or build your arrangements to let you recover from certain kinds of errors, so that you hopefully always have the sections you need when you need them. But there's various reasons. Maybe you accidentally stumble and step on a race on a critical track, or 2 tries isn't enough, or you just have a track where you can't give yourself 2 chances, and you might not have the track you need. So for instance, in my All For You thing here, I've got the chorus chords and the drum groove, right? What if the chorus chords are not there, right? I've tried to record it for whatever reason. I don't have them when I need them. This, by the way, is an arrangement that does build that in. There's multiple choruses before you need that for the solo, but you might not have it for whatever reason, right? So you're playing the song, you get to the solo, and you're like, shoot, I don't have a solo. There's just those chords don't exist. So what I like to do in that case is kind of just feel what the song wants. Like if it's an extended solo, I might even just cut it, unless it makes the song kind of weirdly short. Or I might just play the chords a little louder, do some dynamics, play with inversions, or hum, or if you're one of those people who's blessed to be able to whistle your solo while you play the chords underneath it. There's lots of approaches to that. At the end of the day, it's about the performance and the song and the setting and your patrons. It's not really about doing it perfectly the way you envisioned it in the studio or when you were drawing up your arrangements. So I want to just show like how you might do that with a song like All For You, where say I just don't have those chorus chords, right? So just as a really quick demo for the idea, say I'm getting to the point where the solo's here, right? And so now I've got on All For You, right? There's no chorus chords for whatever reason. So I've got drums, but I've got nothing else. So I'm going to try to show you like a way I might, my ideal is something like this. Etc. That's cool, right? That's why we do looping. It's fun. It's cool. But maybe you don't have that. And the audience doesn't necessarily know what you're going to do in that solo section anyway. So I'm like, oh, I'm just playing the song, Okay, now I got to figure out a solo. Something like that, just make it a little louder, give yourself some dynamics, and some inversions, some, and play it. Like I said, or whistle if you're lucky enough to whistle, or hum, or whatever you want to do. you know, there's lots of ways to kind of fill that section, even if it's not the way you ideally drew it up, just to make sure you're able to go forward. So, and the fact is, you know that's not what you wanted to do. You know that was a mistake. You're like, oh, here I am. I'm being punished for the fact that I failed to record my loops or whatever it may be, or I tripped and someone dropped a hamburger on the stop button for too long, or whatever it may be. Well, you could still play the song, and you know it wasn't what you intended, but probably your patrons have no idea. And that's one of those things you just kind of want to be ready for and roll with. So, one more tip. Now for this last of the kind of basic tips, we're going to be talking about the dreaded train wreck, which it could happen for any number of reasons. I mean, it can happen for reasons that have nothing to do with your performance. I was playing a gig where the power generator ran out of power at the end of the last song. So, you know, any number of things can go wrong, and sometimes you just have to kind of roll with it. So I'm not going to be demoing this. This is definitely more of a talking through kind of tip, but it's good to think about when you get to these situations, what kind of performance do you want to have? Some people like to draw attention to mistakes and loudly proclaim oops and start over. Some people like to play it off like they meant to do that. For me personally, my background includes a little bit of theater improv. And so I like to kind of see if there's a way I can turn these gifts, if you will, into gifts for the audience, things that go wrong that I can turn into something memorable. So my goal here is to know my options. When something like this happens, I want to assess how bad it is. Is the looper dead? Is the loop completely corrupted? Do I still have any of my tracks where I want them to be? Importantly, and kind of the first sub-tip I would say is, if you still have a percussion groove, can you land the song, if you will, using just your percussion and your guitar or your piano or whatever you're playing, your instrument of choice, and just play that song as like an augmented acoustic track, if you will. That's one way to go and deal with the train wreck where like you've made a mess of some other track, you're not able to kind of get that going, just become an acoustic artist and just land the song that way. That's one more common version of this sort of train wreck idea. Another possibility is that the loop is completely dead and you're at the beginning of that performance. Well, then you might want to just accept it, swallow it, say, well, okay, we crashed and burned, let's get that going again. And whatever you're doing there, it's important to lean into your entertainment, your entertainer chops at that point. You know, what I like to do if I just have to bail, and I try to do this as little as possible, like I budget a maximum of one per show, this is just my own approach to this sort of thing, is I like to, you know, talk to the audience if it's appropriate to do so. You know, I strip down the loop if there's any like unnecessary but nice to have kind of stuff, like additional percussion pieces. I try to get all that out there. My own self, I also make sure I try not to get too nervous and accelerate the song. That can happen. But basically just getting myself back on track as quickly as possible and just acknowledging, hey, that's the thing that went wrong. Maybe you make a joke about it if the audience is there for it, you know, and just don't make a habit of it. No one's there to watch you practice in real time. They want a performance, and so find a way to performatively just restart. The third kind of common category, and this is a variation on the last one, is the loop is dead for whatever reason, and there's no getting it back, but you're kind of towards the middle end of the song. You don't really want to start the whole song over at that point. You know, if people aren't vibing in the song, maybe you just like end on a chord and say that's it. But usually what I do try to do there is I actually start just playing the song acoustically with no loop at all and try to recover from that point. So it's always a good idea to keep that in the back of your mind if you're learning a new song. But when you do that, you're basically creating opportunity for like again, a moment, but you're still a performer. You're being a professional. You're soldiering on, going on through. Something I like to do in those situations, if I can, if the loop is not dead, looper is not dead, I should say, is I actually will tend to like use the stop buttons to erase all the tracks, and maybe if there's still a solo section ahead, I kind of re-add the section just for that. I like record it and block it off and just do a very stripped down acoustic with a little looping kind of thing. There's a couple ways to do that, but you know, you're gonna have to roll with the punches. There's really no shortcut for this sort of thing, but it's really about what your performance, you know, in that moment and for you as a performer wants to be. One other like example of this happening, I don't have a good video of this sort of thing, unfortunately, but so I was playing at a place and last song of the night, the power just dies. And so I unplugged my guitar, I wandered out to my admittedly small audience at this point, and I just did the song acoustically and serenaded people. And again, it created a moment, it created a memory. You know, these are this little like moments where it just feels like you're inflappable. You're not, I mean, at least I'm not. I'm like running around hair on fire inside, but I'm trying to create a veneer, a persona where I'm here to entertain you and I'm gonna do it and nothing's gonna stop me. And I think those are really powerful moments that can really help your overall performance and people will talk about you. So with that, we're gonna skip to one more bonus tip. Okay, bonus tip, and this is very much my opinion. This is very much not about music really at all. I think, and this is true whether you're a musician or public speaker or anyone who interacts with more than one person at a time in any setting, I think one theater improv class, one improv class, like an introductory improv class, is valuable to anyone who talks to other humans. Now, obviously I'm speaking from experience. This is like I'm on my stump now. In fact, I don't even have notes for this section because I thought it would be wrong to script the section on improvisation. But the value of that first improv class, especially if you have anything like a good improv teacher, I think it changes your relationship to mistakes. That's why I'm excited about this topic, to be honest, is the first improv class, we practice literally making mistakes and saying, oops, I made a mistake, and just kind of getting okay with sort of creating psychological safety, if you will, around errors. And during the course, again, one class was a 6-course thing I did at the Bay Area Theater Society in Palo Alto, if you're local and you want to try it. I learned to have a fundamentally different relationship to mistakes, and it relaxes me when things are going well, because I'm not like riding along this cliff where I'm worried I fall off and I don't know what to do. I know that I've got, you know, it might be actually the best thing that happens to me when something goes wrong if I'm able to turn that error into a gift, which is the mentality that they teach you. I think that that's super valuable. I think that's great for anyone. I recommend it to anyone. I recommend it to all my musician friends. And honestly, you know, if you're curious enough about a topic about making mistakes, like to watch this video, it's probably got something valuable to give you as well. But for what it's worth, I think theater improv, you know, improv broadly, like rolling with people and dealing with the unknown, it's just a really good thing for your mindset. So that's my bonus tip for you. Do with it what you will, do nothing with it. But that's kind of where I get my, if you will, performance DNA from. And I think it's actually a lot of fun. It means that when these moments happen, instead of panicking, I embrace them. So that's my bonus tip. So, in closing, one thing I really want to emphasize in my limited time performing is that most audience members and even most non-looping musicians have no idea what you're doing up there. And though you, at the controls of your loop station and your little world, are intimately aware of something going wrong, there are lots of ways to recover from those situations that audience members won't perceive at all, or think you're just doing like, one time I did a set of mistakes and someone said, oh my God, Rick's doing a bunch of tap dancing. And it was like part of the joy for them. So I was panicked on the inside. They were enjoying it more because I was scrambling and hitting so many more buttons. They thought what I was doing must have been complex or great. And what I was doing was just hitting everything to figure out what to do next. This is when I was newer. So know that an error in a loop environment can actually truly be a gift. You know, and if I sound excited talking about this, as I mentioned in the previous section, like my background is from improv, and when a mistake happens, and I don't endeavor to make mistakes. In fact, I do, of course, reflect on them after the show and think, what can I have done differently? What can I have done better? How could I have avoided the mistake? Was there a better way to recover from it? I love that kind of post-gig, kind of like check-in on that. But in the moment, I have to treat it as a gift and figure out what the moment wants to teach me. Now, there's no silver bullet, but hopefully what I've given you is a bunch of more targeted ammunition, if you will, around this idea of how to navigate certain kind of expected or common kinds of errors, and hopefully a mindset shift about the way you think about errors. So With that, on a separate note, I did want to thank everyone who has been so unbelievably kind and complimentary on my other couple of videos in this ilk. This is different than the other two. I said that last time too. It felt different than the one before it. But the feedback has been extremely validating, warm, welcoming, whatever you want to call it, all the good words. It's great. I'm trying to find my way on this earth and in this YouTube and become a better, more helpful person, and it's nice that people are getting useful things out of it. So if you did enjoy this, I would really appreciate if you could give it a thumbs up, share it with your musician friends, heck, share it with your non-musician friends if you think there's enough here to show what's going on behind the curtain. But also, if you could subscribe, really appreciate that. I am trying to grow this channel. I have specific goals around that I'm moving towards, and honestly, the support has been very heartening and appreciated, and I would appreciate more. Also, as I mentioned, please do throw comments in for your strategies around this, or if you disagree with any of mine, please do, gently, hopefully, tell me what you would do differently. I would love to learn. I am 5 years in, and if anything about my content on this channel is kind of given that away, I'm still very much learning, and my goal is to never stop learning, so I hope to learn from all of you as well. With that, I'm gonna turn off the camera and let you get back to your day. If you're still listening, thank you so much. And you have a great time. Happy looping, happy performing, happy living, and I'll see you next time.